Well, good evening. Welcome back. Welcome to fall, my favorite time of the year, except for it's dark when I come to church at night. That's having to get used to that, but we'll make it through. Before I begin, the title of tonight's message is Do Not Grow Weary. Sometimes we can feel overcome. I was so encouraged that Tim was able to share, as he did, on a very personal level with us, what's going on in sort of that he just needs an outreach of strength and prayers, and you come to family for that. And so I appreciate that because these are real life problems and real life struggles in a real world. And so we want to be there for them in this instant. Just like I want you to continue to pray for Roger Schwinn and his wife April. Very serious things that affected their lives, which also affected a congregation. Again, real life situations. We're not unaffected because we're in the church. We're not protected because we were raised in the Church of Christ all of our lives, that we have been sheltered from those things in the world. And so sometimes that can kind of get us down. Sometimes it can be heavy enough, and that's why we come in together, that we help carry each other's burdens. That's why even the Lord says that my burden is light. So he wants to be able to carry that. So our starting point tonight, if you want to open your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 12. If you want to go there for a reference point, if you don't have a Bible with you, there's usually one in the pew you can find, or you can borrow it, or look on with a person next to you. Evening time, I don't give the luxury of having it up on the screen. A lot of times I have that for you, so you don't have to. But in this case, we're going to look a little bit more at some verses, so it'd be good to have handy. So Hebrews chapter 12, starting in verse 1. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance of sin, which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. That's the last part where we are to get encouragement. Because, like I said, sometimes the world can come crashing down on us. And the book of Hebrews is a great book of the Bible. I know we often tend to glean to it. I know that it's used as reference points, preached. It's used in Bible class. It's used for other things. When you have time, I suggest you go back and read all of what it says. But it's also a little unfair for me to just kind of jump in the middle of something, kind of like we are doing right now at chapter 12. You say, we didn't even begin for the first 11 chapters. I just went right to 12. But here it is anyway for us to take a look as time allows for this evening tonight. I say that it's unfair of jumping in the middle of it because of what this verse 1 says. It's therefore. Therefore, that means it's a continuation. It's a continuation of thought. Well, what was the thought? Well, what he had just spelled out in chapter 11, and we already know that well, and we talk about that, the Hebrews of the people of faith. And many of you remember Hebrews 11 is a recount of all the great faiths in the Bible. It's called the heroes of faith, and we often hear, as soon as we see Hebrews 11, we immediately already know where we're going. By faith, this one acted. By faith. And then he adds that since we have such a great cloud of witnesses. See, this was not just a good storytelling to just kind of say, wow, great. It was what they accomplished. And a lot of them didn't even see a promise. And that's what's so remarkable. Can we live that way? Where a lot of times we have to see the payoff. Well, our payoff is heaven. We understand that. But a lot of times we want the payoff like right here, right now. It's like I should have had it yesterday. And the thing is, we still have to look as these as example. And here it is. I like the imagery used. It's a cloud hanging over our heads. It's right there. You can kind of grasp up into it to grab their stories. All of these examples so that we can be encouraged and then to take heart. And when you look back at them, and these are from real people with real stories, as we're told, not fables, stories so that we all can relate. By faith, we believe that the worlds were formed by God. Have to. I think it's actually an easier faith to believe that than a Big Bang Theory, and not the TV show Big Bang Theory, but that it all just was an accident, and it just keeps just correcting itself out with all the complexities of life. And I think most of us have gained the wisdom, and it says it takes a greater faith to believe in that than to believe that God spoke it into existence. So we can start from there. But by that as the starting building block for our faith, we have to believe that the worlds were formed by God. By faith. And then the recounts of the stories that we should be familiar with as he goes on about Abel and Enoch and Noah and Abraham and Sarah. Verse 13 concludes, all these died in faith without receiving the promises, but having seen them and having welcomed them from a distance. See, that promise was ahead of them. Just like we have a promise that he is going to return, whether that happens in our lifetime or not. And that's why we're all to be waiting for his appearing. So here it is, from a distance, and having confessed that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. We often sing the song, this is not my world, this is not my home, I'm just passing through. They recognize that. This is not everything I can gain for right now. This is not all it. And some people live their lives like that, but they understand it in that way. And that's why we have to try to point that out to them, that that's not it. God has placed eternity on their hearts to know that it goes beyond the grave. We just don't die and then it's over. We often say death is an end to something. It's only the beginning as we understand it. They had the prelude. And even though we have come to know in a full version of our Bible from start to finish, we know Christ was there from the beginning, as John says, and takes it all the way through to the New Testament. And receiving the promise as we welcomed our end by faith, we believe when we die, promises for us will be fulfilled, don't we? Well, sure. That's what keeps us going. That is encouraging to us. Then chapter 11 reminds of Moses and Rahab and Joseph, and we could go on and on. And then this to conclude all of what they and now we should have learned in these stories starting in verse 22. And what more shall I say? For the time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, but foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection, and others were tortured, not accepting their release, so that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others experienced mockings and scourgings, yes, also chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were tempted. They were put to death by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, ill-treated. Does that all sound like happy times for you? Verse 38, men of whom the world was not worthy, wandering in deserts and mountains and caves and holes in the ground. So why keep going? Being sawed in half? The first century, the first 300 years for the church, such persecution that we like to cringe and not even like to hear about people being lit up at garden parties, as entertainment. As I explained to Josh as we were watching a football game today, I said, can you imagine a 60,000 plus audience? How does mankind get to where we'll just say, I know, instead of having a football game, let's put these Christians out there and let's have the lions go at them, and then we'll just cheer as they're eaten alive. Isn't that great? Go home and say, man, let's get some popcorn. This is exciting. And to endure all that. Verse 39, and all of these things have gained approval through their faith. Did not receive what was promised because God had provided something better for us, so that apart from us, they would not be made perfect. All of their told challenges and setbacks, and there's a lot to take in as if you absorb what they were going through, and told for a reason. It's for our learning. And to know not everything goes as planned in the beginning. To go back and read on Moses and Joseph. Was it a cakewalk like some expect Christianity to be, without any complications or stumbling blocks or any obstacles? It's this delusion that we get sometimes. What about Moses' story? We know about Moses becoming what he was in the end, but recap his story before we get to the end. Of comfort in this first 40 years, and you think, okay, well, now God's going to lead him. Right now at 40, he's at the ripe young age, is a great leader. Kills the Egyptian, runs off, wanders in and becomes a shepherd for 40 more years, and then is called by God at the young, tender age of 80 to start his work. What about Joseph? What about all the stories that he could tell, as we kind of mentioned briefly over and over, for our reminder about whether your family has completely abandoned you and thrown you in a pit and really wanted to kill you at first, but that wasn't a good idea because then they would have to suffer the wrath of their own father. So they derived with a plan of, okay, well, at least we can do that and sell them into slavery. We don't get Joseph's account by going saying, boy, if this is the God I serve and I trust in you and this is what happens to me and my family all abandon me, I'm done. And there are people who have done that and walked away. Even when you get to Potiphar's wife and being in prison such wrongfully, being in wrong situations, he did the right thing. He stood up to wrong and stood up to the advances of Potiphar's wife and left away, and she cried rape. And everybody was going to believe the woman in this story. And off he goes. And then, not only that, a great little added bonus is while he's there, some people that kind of knew him and knew that he could get him out said, remember me when you get out of this situation because you know I'm wrongfully here. And he wasn't remembered. He was forgotten. Is this the thanks I get? Is this what I signed up for? And after recounting on just these, and you could go on and on about all today with a great cloud of witnesses, and what are they supposed to do? Encourage us. Like I'm trying to get out this evening. And then gives us the ultimate example to end with Christ. He who endured a cross. If we say that was easy to do, then why did he anguish so much in the garden? If there was any other way, not only through this death, but being separated from the Father, there was no separation. Having to do that with despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. What does the Hebrew writer want us to do as we go forward? First, he says to lay aside all, this basic, everything that stands in the way of our faith, that we're willing to do, which includes maybe some which is listed in chapter 11. All the obstacles and sin which we put to death in our lives as well. Not try to get along with and live with and accept as what society is telling us to, and have these sins which I like how it says, it's very honestly, it so easily entangles us. Easily. We think, we'll just, it's amazing. Kay and I were on a walk the other day, and it just rained, and I had never seen so many cobwebs before in my life, but there was just enough rain and dew to illuminate all of them. Now, they had been on our walk. I had just walked past it, thinking there's nothing here. And for a fly, I'm sure that they probably like all this, that, hey, I can see this now. I'm not flying in this direction. I mean, they were at every turn of the corner. I said, can you imagine? Look at how many there are. And they had been there all the time, but the rain had brought those out. And so we can so easily be entangled in any of this. Not so many of us want to admit that, the entangled part. Why so many in addictions today becomes a life of what they know as denial. We'd rather say how sin isn't really a part of my life and sin doesn't affect me and I am in control. That's really more of a denial thing, which John in 1 John addresses. If we say we have no sin and say we have not sinned, of course, we lie and the truth is not in us. And secondly, admit how easily we get into these. You read of the stories of even Moses and David and Peter, all of those who failed miserably. We're in the same company. We do as well. So we must recognize our weaknesses, not be puffed up in arrogance that we have it all together somehow. I know I still don't, and I still battle with things. You do also if you're really, truly honest with yourself. because none of us arrived, none of us has attained. The Bible comments that all will fall in many ways. Many ways. Your way may not be my way, and my way may not be someone over here. That's why it's not just one. It's not a cookie cutter thing of, okay, well, there you fall. There's so many that come at us in all different directions. What you struggle with may not be what I struggle with, and vice versa. Not the same for everybody. It's not going to be the same for everybody. We're all made up differently in that way. That's why we're so unique. I loved it when, as a child, they say, you know, every snowflake is different. And you look at a whiteout in a snowstorm and you say, really? Can that really be true? Just like people. We may have some similarities, but we're all unique and different. So what entangles us is in the same way. Then he gives us more insight with our walk, saying that the life in Christ that we now choose is an enduring race. He doesn't say just run to be in a race, but to endure the race. Because as the story of the siege will show you, that there are people that will start and then wither away. They won't finish. They never saw it as an endurance race. They take as what most, and sadly on a lot of TV and radio today, is a one and done religion. Just accept the fact that there's a Jesus and you're saved. Now go live your life. Really, that's the concept. There's nothing more you need to do because you're already saved, and no one can take that away from you. But endure the race, the only important one that we are called in with this life. He says, let us run with endurance the race, because that is what it's going to take. It's a marathon of life. It's not a 10-yard dash. It's not a quick sprint. And I like the word endure. To endure something means that we may have to overcome some stuff. And we have to keep going. May see some adversity along the way. Paul uses the same example for comparison and himself over in 1 Corinthians 9, starting in verse 24. I'll read that. If you want to turn there, you can. 1 Corinthians 9, 24. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Guess what? That hasn't changed in over 2,000 years. The Olympic, not everybody's the winner. They don't hand out gold medals to everybody that crosses the finish line. It's, here's the race, start to finish, and when that cross is over, this is the winner, and he is declared the winner. Only one receives the prize. That doesn't change. But what he wants us to notice is how we are to run. He says, run in such a way that you may win. Not run in such a way that you may participate. Not run so you can get a participation ribbon, because it's going to take more than that. Because it's going to be hard. It's going to take more than just the wanting to start up a race to know to endure. Verse 25, everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. That's why we love Olympians. But we like to appreciate them and not emulate them, because they say there's no way I'm going to do that. I'm not going to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and have a regimen of what they eat and what they don't eat and how much exercise they get. I can't do that. We throw in the towel. But see, spiritually speaking, he says, this is what it's going to have to take. This is what you're going to have to be involved in, spiritually speaking. Just like them in a physical race. And they exercise self-control in all things, not just some things. And they do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. Therefore, I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air. I hit the target. But I discipline my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified. You see what kind of dedication it takes? See how few be there that will find it? We all want it. A lot desire it, but won't go through with it. Like what Jesus says in his parables, that the kingdom of heaven is like a man who finds a treasure in a field and goes and sells everything that he has. See, that's why it says you love God with all your heart, soul. I mean, that's everything. Are you willing to give up everything? And we hear a little monetary value here. I don't know if I'd do that for like a little pearl or a gem. I don't know if I would sell everything I had to go get this. And the merchant who searches for pearls and finds one of great price, and he too goes out and sells everything. Because it's that important. He has to get it. Do we see our end in heaven as such a great prize, or have we taken the free gift so much for granted? We have to see it with such great value as they did to possess it, so we all can what? endure. And then the Hebrew writer tells us how we can accomplish this, explained in the next verse, in verse 2 of that chapter 12. Or, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. We can notice that Jesus used the very same thing as mentioned in this verse, saw the joy set before him. So he could what? So he could endure the cross and despise the shame. He had to see, as if you want to say, the goal line, or he had to see the prize. He had to see the rewards of it so that he could get through all of that. What's my reward on the other side? And what happens to Christ when he has gone through all of that? Does he die and is left in a tomb where all can just go and visit? A graveside with all that's left is bones? No, this points that he sits down at the right hand of God. So we can take it and use the same as what Christ was able to do, which this says again is the author and perfecter of faith. Not only has he told us and the author of faith, but he's also shown us. The same way, the same end. We can do the same when we, what? Fix our eyes on him. Remember that's what Peter did when he stepped out on the boat? When he asked to walk on the water and the Lord said, come. So all you have to do is tell me to do it. It's okay. Come out. And he did. By Jesus' authority. He did just that. And he puts and stretches out his faith. And we love him so much for that. And he looked upon the Lord. And then he looked upon the Lord until when? Until calamity came. And then what happened when he took his eyes off the Lord? It doesn't take long. Just for a second. It's just a moment. He saw the waves. He saw the wind. He saw the distractions. He took his eyes off the Lord for just a momentary lapse of judgment and the reason. And for a quick moment, it can happen so quickly. That's why he talks about enduring that are so mighty big distractions out there and can be for all of us in life. And just like so many warnings given out, for example, to not text and drive. We have to have laws in place, not only in the state of Oklahoma, which is now in effect because it's in November, and in the city of Lawton, it's $150 fine for it. And I don't know, I've not followed up about how many they've already written or how many they're going to write, but I can guarantee you that they will have, just like speeding, they'll have this forever because you won't stop it. Because the thing is, unless they have a device that in your car shuts down your texting ability, that'll be the next thing, to shut it down, have a buffer zone, because it has to take it away from you. Because we all think that we can multitask and we can do all these things, even these horrendous public service announcements of people that have lost their lives because of it. It doesn't matter. We just, for a brief moment, seconds, 7 to 8 seconds, can cause an accident. Just taking our eyes off the road for a split second can cost someone their life. It can take your own. And why there are so many campaigns to warn against a society, for the most part, that thinks it's no big deal. That I can handle this. I've got this. Until something happens, and then it's an apology. Maybe to a family that's lost that loved one. I'm sorry. What were you doing? I was on my phone. What was so important? And then they read you these ridiculous texts that were sent right before their end. We keep our eyes upon him who not only came up with the idea of faith in the first place, but has perfected it. Then we go to my favorite part, found in verse 3. For consider him who has endured such hostility. And by who? By sinners. That's why we, appreciate that song. He could have called 10,000 angels, but he died alone for you and me. Yeah, that's the authority he had. He could have stopped it all and wiped us all out. But he endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and that you will not lose heart. He doesn't want us to forget. So in order for us to consider something, we have to hear about it, we have to think about it, we have to meditate on it. We weigh out the balances. That's what a consideration is. Consider. I'm going to think on it. I'm not just going to hear about it. Consider takes some thought, some forethought. And in this case, we consider what? All what he did. Christ, when he endured such hostility. For what? For you. And for me. Have you considered what God did for you when he didn't have to? Do we really earnestly appreciate that gift? Many have not. And he endured such hostility by sinners against himself. And he did all that, and how he's left that us for example. Why? So that you and I will not grow weary and lose heart. Because it's easy to do. And he knew it's an endurance race and it would be tough. And I'm sure there were a lot of times those named, listed in Hebrews 11, we reviewed a moment ago, had some bad things in their life. And they had some bad days. Those aren't written in the account so much for us because we see the end. That's why I love it. It says over and over again, he that endureth till the end shall be saved. Maybe the things didn't work out as planned because we have a cheat sheet. We get to see their end when they were going through it, didn't know how it was going to end, just like your life. I don't know how this is going to end, but I'm just going to keep trusting. I'm just going to keep having faith in God because I just have that much trust. And God reminds us that I am here. I will never leave you nor forsake you. And that's comforting as well. And knowing all what he did should be comforting so we can go on, so we can endure, not grow weary. Growing weary is just like planting. It's over time. Weariness just kind of hovers. The weary days, but grow not weary. It's like in the garden that's over time, and to not lose heart. You may not have seen it, as I have when someone is about to die, perhaps, with the hopelessness. Someone who has totally lost heart. They said they've kind of given up on life. And even through trials and tribulations, God wants us to know that through him, we are victorious. Why? Because he has already won the battle. And that's what's encouraging. For all of what he had to go through when he didn't have to. Could have packed up and left early. Could have taken all these little side routes that Satan wanted him to do. Take your rightful place right now. Don't put your will on God and what he has to do to try to derail that hope for us by not letting him go to the cross for us. So don't grow weary and don't lose heart. If we can be of any encouragement to you, that's why we offer an invitation that we can pray with you and for you. Maybe you never obey the gospel and we don't want an opportunity to go unnoticed to say everything is ready, everything is prepared. If that is your desire, whatever your need is, if you have one, if you'll come now as we stand and as we sing.